Okay, so thank you so much. And I have many more questions, but I will yield to the audience. But before we do that, I just want to say that I know people come here with a lot of different kinds of expertise and experience, but there are a lot of people in the room. So I just want to make sure you please, I just want to ask, request that you please do frame what you have to say as a question that Haroon can answer, and so that everyone who has a question gets a chance to ask. And then before opening up the floor, I just want to read briefly a few lines from the book. This is a scene in which Guru Nanak is meeting the Jewish captain of a ship that has come from Muscat. And he meets him, and this is what Guru Nanak tells the ship captain, who's Jewish. You are my follower if you are willing to learn all your life. You have to remain a student forever, like me. Learn from not only scholars and holy men, but also from those whom you choose to ignore. Servants, women, children, animals, plants, the sea, the land, and the sky. Keep an open mind and never become too rigid in your beliefs. Dogma is the end of inquiry and hence the death of enlightenment. Have faith not only in your own goodness, but also in that of others. Faith in people even when you know they are deceiving. And then and the speech goes on, and the captain has a kind of epiphany. He understands. And what Haroon writes is that the captain,
I'll just talk loudly. Can you hear me? The captain realizes that his hatred for all the people who had wronged him over the years was unnecessary. He knew now that all of them had their own baggage that they carried, and their immediate reaction was not a result of just one event, but an entire historical process. So please, let's now open the floor to questions, and in that spirit of inquiry and all this being a student, keep that in mind as we ask questions.
thank you. So I know I have one question here somebody has sent up, but I'll let you ask it in your own words. I don't want to read it for you. And just speak as loudly as you can. Yes, ma'am.
I'll let this lady go and then fit out.
Rabir, nice to meet you guys finally. So everyone, hi. I'm really glad to see such a great turnout. Haroon, this journey that you're talking about, whether it was spiritual or not, you are doing something that's very on the edge for a society which is just barely opening up. Besides how this is transformative, how were you received in Pakistan for this book?
Hello, Harvey. Finally doing me. So the question is that how is the book received in Pakistan, and talking about the Sikh heritage in the country, is that tolerable, and how do people respond?
And how were you treated doing that?
Yeah, I think out of all my books, Walking with Nanak has received the best reception in the country as well. So there seems to be, I think I am lucky in the sense that I happen to be writing at a time when the society also is increasingly becoming, I mean, I won't say more tolerant, because of course you have incidents of hatred and intolerance still happening in the country. But at least from the state's point of view, I feel like the state is going through a transformation, and the state is opening up to acknowledging its non-Muslim history, even though it does not call it its history, it calls it the other's history. But the fact is that it still is open to the idea that there were non-Muslims living in this region before, right? So for example, interestingly, and this would have never happened 30, 40 years ago, where the Supreme Court actually got involved and got the Katasaraj temple, which is an ancient Hindu temple, renovated. And you can't imagine that happening in the 80s or even in the 90s. So for example, if I had written this book, or if I had been talking about Hindu or Sikh heritage of Pakistan in the 80s or the 90s, perhaps it would have been a different story altogether. I would have been called anti-Pakistan, I would have been called anti-state, and people who did that, people were called. For example, when Iqbal Kaisar started writing about, and he was accused, he was even threatened at some point. I was very, very lucky in that sense that I happened to firstly write in English. Once again, if I was writing in Urdu, different audience, perhaps would have been a very different perception. I have that kind of privilege that comes, my class privilege, my language privilege. It kind of helps me survive and even perhaps be appreciated in certain segments. So I feel like, yeah, I'm privileged. I'm lucky to be writing at a time where the state is going through a transformation. It is more tolerant. I mean, the Kartarpur, for example, corridor, once again, did not happen in a vacuum. There has been a movement towards doing this. Sikh gurdwaras have been renovated since the 80s, and of course now there are more gurdwaras that have been renovated. So the state seems to be more tolerant towards anybody who likes or who is writing about Sikh history or even Hindu history for that matter.
आप मेरे लिए नए नहीं, मैं आपको डांस में रोज देखता हूँ और पिछले 18 साल आपकी जो ट्रैवल है सब मेरा क्वेश्चन भी ऑलमोस्ट मेरा जैसा है कि जैसे पाकिस्तान में अपना जो सन्स ऑफ द सॉयल है उसको वो कहते हम नहीं कराते, हम तो अर्बन। वहाँ जो मुल्ला और मिलिट्री का कॉम्बिनेशन था, क्या वो ठीक रहा? और आपकी जो कोशिश है
We cannot hear anything. Can we give him a microphone?
Do we have a spare mic or? All right.
They can go on recording.
ओके, हरून खान साहब और मोहतरमा ज़कारिया, आप मेरे लिए नए नहीं हैं। आपको मैं रोज डांस पे देखता हूँ और तकरीबन आपकी सारी राइटिंग पढ़ी है और आपकी जो बुक है लाहौर, वो भी मैं बाई की। हेलो, बाकी बुक्स मुझे मिल नहीं सकी चंडीगढ़ से, लेकिन वो भी मैं उसकी तलाश में था। तो बात यह है कि जो पाकिस्तान की ऑफिशियल हिस्ट्री है वो मोहम्मद बिन कासिम से शुरू करते हैं। तो आपको ये इतना पुराना जो बहाव है उसको कैसे जोड़ेंगे कि जो उन्होंने डिसोन कर दिया कि हम तो जहाँ के नहीं हैं, हम तो अरब हैं नहीं, तो हम तो ना सूफीज़म को मानते हैं। अभी भी हमले हो रहे हैं, अभी शाह कलंदर के मज़ार पे हुए हैं। तो आप ऐसे पूरे सलाब को कैसे बदलेंगे? क्योंकि गुरु नानक भी एक सूफी थे। ये मेरा छोटा
Hello, sir. Thank you for reading all my articles and Anam's articles, and thank you for that question. I think you're absolutely right. So unfortunately, what has also happened in the India-Pakistani context is that history has been divided and heroes have been divided. So India's villains is our heroes and vice versa. Mahmud Ghaznavi is our hero and Muhammad bin Qasim is our hero, and now the Mughals are our heroes. Within the Mughals, Aurangzeb is our hero and Akbar not so much, whereas in India is the other way around. And of course, it seems like things are getting much, much worse. But first, my question, not to the people of Pakistan or to the state would be that, firstly, why do we need to search for heroes in kings and kings and these statesmen? The idea that Mahmud Ghaznavi, for example, killed as many Muslims as he perhaps must have killed Hindus, and so did Babur, or so did Akbar, and so did Aurangzeb. So the idea is that ordinary people had no association with a ruler. A ruler was a ruler, irrespective of religion. So our heroes, for example, the fact that you're absolutely right. Like, for example, today. But still, of course, so I think from my point of view, it will be very idealistic to say that Pakistan should have no heroes and we should move beyond that world. Even though I think we need to go to that world where we need to move beyond heroes and villains and see people as who they are, which is human beings. Everybody is a hero, everybody is a villain at the same time. But anyway, I think that's too far-fetched. I think Pakistan still needs, and India still needs heroes and villains. Yeah, fine. So let's choose heroes. Why can't Baba Farid be our hero? Why can't Waris Shah be our hero? Why can't Bulleh Shah be a hero? Why do we need to search for heroes in Mahmud Ghaznavis? And that's the fact that if you keep on searching for heroes in Mahmud Ghaznavis and Muhammad Qasims. Then you get people like Mumtaz Qadri, for example, who continue existing. Mumtaz Qadri, for those of you who don't know, is the person who killed Salman Taseer, the governor of Punjab, for supporting a Christian woman. So that's the idea. We need to move beyond this idea of heroes. And you're right, there's a long tradition of Pakistan completely acknowledging its own history. That Indus Valley is not ours. I mean, we went through a period where, for example, Jamaat Islami at one point claimed that we should completely bury all the Indus Valley cities and they're not part of our history, they're part of Hindu history, or somehow send them, Taj Mahal yahan bhej dein aur Harappa wahan le jaye. Is tarah ki baatein hoti thi. So, I mean, yeah, but I think today what is happening is that I feel like at some level there is a transformation, right? So, for example, this recent museum that we went to in Lahore, it was a state museum. उसके अंदर हड़प्पा मुझे की बात करते हैं, उसको बड़े इंटरेस्टिंगली उसको इंडियन हिस्ट्री नहीं कहते, उसको पाकिस्तानी हिस्ट्री कहते हैं। वो काफ़ी एक इंटरेस्टिंग टर्म था। मुझे वो भी बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉलिटिक्स है कि इंडिया क्या है, पाकिस्तान क्या है, जो आज का इंडिया है क्या वो एक्चुअली हिस्टोरिकल इंडिया भी है या नहीं। सो इज ऑल्सो क्वेश्चन दैट वन नीड्स टू आस्क। बट एनीवे, सो आई थिंक देयर इज सम एक्नॉलेजमेंट ऑफ इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन। फिर होता ये कि इंडस वैली की हम बात कर लेते हैं, हम बुद्धा की भी बात कर लेते हैं, हम जैन हिस्ट्री की बात कर लेते हैं, हिंदू हिस्ट्री बिल्कुल गायब हो जाती है। So I feel like the state has come to a point where it can talk about certain non-Muslim history, but non-Muslim के अंदर भी हम particular बात कर सकते हैं। अभी भी सिख हिस्ट्री की भी बात करते हैं, रंजीत सिंह की भी बात होती है, और शायद उतने बुरे अल्फाज में नहीं होती जितनी पहले इस ज़माने में होती थी। So it's also transformed, but we still haven't acknowledged Hindu history at all. Even though I don't like the term Hindu history, I think it still reflects a very similar idea. I think Hindu history is Sikh history नहीं होती, is history is more interlinked than we think it is. Ranjit Singh is not Sikh history, Ranjit Singh is Lahore's history, Ranjit Singh is Pakistan's history, or India's history. Anyway, so I think that transformation is happening, and let's hope that one day we will be open to the idea of also acknowledging Hindu history, not just other ones.
Yeah, and happy to take the next question. I'm trying to make sure I get some ladies also.
Why don't we have them come to the front? Why don't we have them come to the front and say?
सारे सत श्री अकाल। हाँ जी, इधर आए।
Please don't have stage fright. If you have a question, just come.
Satia, sat sri akal. Okay, my question is, when we talked about Guru's travels, and we stopped at Baghdad, not any further, and I don't think so that once he told me about that captain's conversation, that means Guru Nanak did not go to Italy, Rome. He must have gone to Rome. But as we know, the British has distorted the whole history of the world. And they probably never brought that up to this time. Recently, there was in the paper that one of our Zaheer went to Vatican and they made some statements. But I want to bring to what I read about the book. Okay, all right. So my question is that he did answer a little bit, but today the problem is all the governments, whether here, over there, or in India, they are not for the people. They want to stay in power one way or another. But I think this guy is doing a very good job that we can be together on the inside and outside. So that's my...
I don't think that's a question, but thank you so much for that one. Is there anybody else who would like to ask? Okay.
Yeah, and that's because I think there'll be many questions. Just please try to frame your question. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Really, I'm so sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Khalid, I am Muslim and I'm from India. I have a great respect for the Sikh Panth, starting from Guru Nanak to the last Guru and the living Guru, Guru Inside. My question is actually divided into two parts. The first actually heading is on the objective outcome and the second is on the background correction. The first part of this one is what is the objective, what the end result you are trying to achieve by writing this one. And my second question is this. If you look up actually, how can I gain the trust of my Sikh brothers as a Muslim when the history is actually shows about such a deep conflict of killing of those gurus by Muslim kings? How can actually this one, and like assuming if Guru Nanak is alive today, how actually we'll do that actually, and what guidance we can get it from the living Guru to fill up this one, and how can I gain the trust? Thank you very much.
I think this is a great question. I would love to answer that. I think there's a very deep organic connection between the Muslim community in India and the Sikhs. I mean, for example, once again, when you talk about Guru Nanak, how can you talk about Guru Nanak without talking about Baba Farid? In every Sikh Gurdwara, you will find a picture of Baba Farid. And Baba Farid was a practicing Muslim. Once again, you talk about Guru Arjan, you talk about Mian Mir. Right? For example, you talk about Guru Har Rai, you have to talk about Dara Shikoh. So there has been a huge history of borrowing. Unfortunately, what happened was that at the time of partition, and of course even after, the only focus or the only thing that we talk about, even for example, Bhai Mardana, who still remained a Muslim at the time of his death, and Guru Nanak. So there is a very, very deep and strong connection between the Muslim community of South Asia and the Sikh community that developed. I mean, and unfortunately what happened, of course, and in the Mughal history is also there, right? So you cannot deny the fact that Guru Arjan was assassinated, executed on the orders of Emperor Jahangir, and Guru Tegh Bahadur was killed on the orders of Aurangzeb. But once again, I think I kind of mentioned this earlier as well, that Emperor Jahangir does not represent me today. I am a Muslim of South Asia. He's not, I mean, he was a king, and he was a king like any other king. I mean, kings don't have religions. Those ideas are very, very flawed. Kings their only religion is power. And if they have to kill a Sikh or a Muslim, I mean, Jahangir, I mean, there's stories of how, I think it was either Jahangir who persecuted, or I think, I'm not sure, my history is not that strong, I guess. But the idea that you will find histories of Muslims persecuting history, of Muslim kings persecuting Muslim subjects as well, to stay in power. Those traditions have remained alive. It's just that, so why do we need to focus on the Mughal Sikh conflict? Why can't we talk about the Miami's and Baba Farid's and Dara Shikoh's, of course? So the idea is that we need to, there is a deep connection that needs to be addressed. Mughals don't represent Muslims, they represent something very different. There's also one more part of the question. So what's the agenda? I think the only agenda was that I wanted to write a book that I wanted to read 10 years ago that I couldn't find. One book perhaps that could encapsulate or tell me really as a Pakistani Muslim who Guru Nanak was and who were all the other Sikh gurus.
On that note, I wish you had written this book much earlier, because I've been also trying to find my heritage. I'm Sikh, and I could not connect. I've been struggling to find the history where I can connect, and thank you. Your book, which you wrote, really connected me, and humanizing and making that. For those who have not read, I would like to just quickly, it's an infomercial for the book, please do read it. I was so inspired. I took my 80-year-old parents. One question. All right, go to the question directly. And you heard before my question. My question is that in book you talk about Wali Kandhari episode there, Panja Sahib, where the myth is that Guru Nanak Dev Ji stopped the rock with the hand. And the question I have is, you write it differently, that the village crazy guy did the handprint and then he sold it to the one. And whereas the Sikhs, educated Sikhs, when I converse with them and I ask them, what do you think, which is the true story? And they give me a third version of it, saying that, no, in those days people would leave their prints, they would, somebody, wise man prints would be left with, they will take their handprints and put in there. So I just want to know what your research, question is, what your research was behind that to come up with that story. Thank you.
So the Gurdwara Panjat Sahib of Hassanabad is a very, very important part of Guru Nanak's story. In fact, so in order to understand the history of the Gurdwara, you have to understand there's a long history of borrowing and sharing between different religious communities of India. So many Buddhist shrines eventually became Jain shrines, many Hindu shrines became Buddhist shrines, and so and vice versa. Right? So there are historical evidences that talk about how the stream that comes into Hassanabad that became sacred, the pond that became sacred in the Sikh tradition, was also sacred 700-800 years ago, and in the Buddhist tradition. So if you think rationally, I feel like what happened must have happened. This was a sacred place that eventually also became sacred under Sikh tradition, and the legend kind of grew. So the story that I wrote in the book as fictionalized, it's not my story. It is basically colonial history. So if you read British Gazetteer report of Hazara district, that's the story that is recorded in there. And I'm not saying that is the true story. I'm just saying that is the interpretation that I read and I wrote about it in the book, just to say that there could have been a different alternative perception to this.
Sorry to interrupt. We're running short on time. I just please ask your question as briefly, and I think we will just take 2 more questions, and then we'll break for lunch. I apologize for the cutting everyone short.
So, Haroon, beautiful job. My question is, how do we move this beyond the rural and the intellectual? There's a huge gap. Pindan koi pareshani nahi hai. Lokan di multiple identities hai, and they live with it. Intellectual circles, everybody gets along. You're mainstream engineers, lawyers, military men, businessmen. There is a huge problem. How do you get the message to the mainstream? That is where the change of hearts needs to happen. How do you address that? Because intellectual circles have been fine for 30 years, 40 years. How do you address that?
Thank you for that question. I think you're absolutely right. There's a big need. I think, maybe, so I think that's kind of what I try to do. Let's say, so I'm not writing in a very academic environment. I'm writing in newspapers. I mean, these could become part of scholarly journalists, scholarly articles, which remain limited, but newspapers have that tendency to reach out to a much wider audience. But unfortunately, not many people end up reading, so that also becomes a problem. But I think films, documentaries, so these stories need to be addressed. I mean, how long will we end up making movies and documentaries that talk about violence? Right? So Anam, for example, talks about this in her book, that especially, even if, for example, partition, we talk about something like partition, and there's many documentaries on partition that talk about violence, which of course is a very, very important part of partition. But there are about 40%, I think Anish Nandi did this research on partition, that 40% partition stories are those of rescue. Why can't we talk about those stories? Once again, we talk about Sikh-Muslim conflict or Sikh-Mughal conflict. Why can't we talk about this Baba Farid and Mian Mir connection between the Sikh history? So I think it needs to be made more mainstream, you're absolutely right. It needs to be part of the education system. And once again, we need to also divorce education from job market. I think that's also a huge problem.
I want to add to that as a teacher here, that especially those of you who are parents, when this goes back to the earlier question too about Mughal history and Muslim and Sikh history and the wrong versions being out there. When we tell our kids that the only thing that matters is learning computer science, coding, and that nothing else has value, they don't become readers of things like this. So that has to be part of the culture, to waste time communing with the dead and the gone and the lost, right? So encourage an interest in the humanities in your children and your grandchildren. Last question, please, thank you.
Where's Tashie? Okay, why don't we ask both the questions and then answer?
Well, I'll be very quick. I was surprised you said you couldn't find a book on Sikhism in Pakistan. I went to Pakistan and my host had a college graduate daughter. She had never seen a Sikh. I said, why you do not even know about it? She says, in college and universities we can't learn about other religion. Religion reconciliation occurs only if there is education about others. I'm glad you wrote this book. I hope they'll put a library there. Okay, thank you.
I think I mentioned this earlier that I'm very aware of the privilege that I have writing as, let's say, a man and writing in English. I know there are, for example, some trolls or sometimes that I'm attacked. Of course, Anam also writes. And then you can almost see a gendered aspect to, for example, how people criticize her and how people criticize me. For me, it will be very direct. Aapne history nahi padhi, aapko pata nahi hai. Anam ke baare will be very direct gender attack. Or you don't like. So I mean, she'll perhaps talk about that later. But the idea is that I think as I feel like the society has become more tolerant to talk about. There is a segment, at least in the English-speaking media. So, for example, if you read Dawn, a lot of your perceptions of what Pakistan is and how oppressive the society is. I mean, it is very oppressive in many ways, still is. I'm not going to present, I'm not a brand ambassador of the country here. But the idea that it is transforming and there is a space to talk about these things. I am, I think, appreciated in Pakistan as well. I've given many lectures. I do launch all my books there, and I don't think I've besides like 1 or 2 comments perhaps on Facebook. I mean, I think perhaps how I survive is that I don't follow Twitter or Facebook that much, so I don't read the comments a lot. I used to earlier, which really make me upset, but now I just don't engage, and I'm happy in my own little bubble. Perhaps that's how I survive, I guess. Thank you so much for your
Please thank Haroon Khalid so much for your time and for this beautiful book. And I'm very sorry for cutting people short, and please continue the conversation over lunch. Thank you so much.